Welcome, reanimated fans, to this week's episode. I'm H.A. Conrad, coming to you from the East Coast, along with my intrepid co-host, Stuart, who's coming to you from the West Coast. Hello, Stuart.
Yo, hey. Hi.
Are you feeling intrepid today?
Somewhat intrepid. You know, we've also got, in my fair state of California, the majority of cases of coronavirus for the U.S., so... Yeah,
well,
maybe not so intrepid as ready to hole up.
Well, let's talk about a little bit of coronavirus news. So we got some news going on, and then today we're going to review a film that we've been talking about a little bit, One Cut of the Dead, which is a Japanese zombie film, and I'm really excited to talk about this with you. But before we get to that, let's get into our news. And, you know... despite some of the numbers, I don't feel like this is as grim as we thought it was, because at least we know a little bit more. But as of, and seems daunting, I know, it seems daunting when we talk about it, but the numbers have gone up substantially. So as of today, 69,000 have been infected. And we've got
it's kind of like a good news, bad news story.
Yeah,
right?
We've got
the numbers hopped up on that day when I texted you and I was like, look at these numbers. And you're like, calm down, Stuart. Just read the news.
Yeah.
So that was because I read the data before I read the news.
Right.
And you were right. It was like more tests had been provided and they had changed the way they were releasing data.
But
then the good news part is, look at the last 3 days. China's like, hey, the cases are totally slowing down, you guys.
Yeah. And there are 1669 at this point dead, which is, you know, it's not an insubstantial number, but it puts it at about the same mortality rate as the flu. And the thing is that in terms of the counting, basically there weren't a ton of tests and that kind of thing. But as we had talked about before, I mean, there was no way that the numbers could be as low as they were saying, just given the sort of the number of people that are infected by one person and the long incubation period. But on the positive side, fewer new cases, and it also seems like people are recovering. And then I found an article on NPR, which was basically talking a little bit more about this specific strain of coronavirus and what it does and what happens when it's fatal. And so for the most part, and for the majority of the population, the symptoms are just similar to flu, and people recover from it relatively easily. Unfortunately, for 20% of the population, it ends up, of people who get infected, they end up having much more significant issues like pneumonia, and it attacks the lung tissue in a way that causes your immune system to almost overreact, which is actually weirdly a little bit like what happened with the Spanish flu, which was like a cascade effect. Now they have found that, and this is again in the good news category, that the blood plasma of people who have recovered from the coronavirus, which now they have named, by the way, as COVID-19. That doesn't sound ominous or anything. But they have found that if they use the plasma of people who have recovered on people that are still struggling with this, especially people who are having these stronger reactions, they actually are getting like a good response, and they seem to be recovering, and it basically teaches their immune system how to respond to this. So not necessarily, and you know, of like, as a person with asthma, I get a little nervous when I see these underlying health condition things happening, because I am one of those people. So it freaks me out a little bit, but I am staying chill about it, because like really this sounds actually a lot like the flu virus. And speaking of,
there's also bad news about the flu.
Well, not bad. You know, this happened last season, and I don't know if this happened in California or if you heard of this, but at least here in New York, there was like a very odd trajectory of the flu last year, which meant that everybody thought that the flu season was over, but it actually had a weird spike in the summertime, and in fact people I knew got taken down by it in the summertime, which is really unusual. Typically you don't see that as much. And it was like a specific strain that they normally see peak earlier in the season. And in this case, they're also seeing like an odd sort of spike in a different strain of the flu.
So we're starting off with influenza B, and then like midstream, influenza A is popping up. Yeah. And I've heard of families just through, you know, the mom and dad Facebook network of my town being like, OMG, we had the flu before Christmas and now we have the flu again. And WTF.
Yeah.
Lots of those kinds of things.
But again, in the good news category, at least the flu vaccine tends to cover more of the A influenza viruses. And also, I will say, just given how crazy people have gotten about the coronavirus, maybe that will stop the transmission of the flu, or at least slow it a little bit. Maybe all those masks I'm seeing on the subway will be for like a good thing now.
Maybe it's sinking in a metropolis like New York, but I don't think for the majority of and why should it? There's 15 cases in the U.S. Of course, there are a few different scaremongering sort of headlines out there about pandemic coming to U.S. and U.S. health officials warn of pandemic. U.S. military prepares for pandemic, but while I'm not sure that the COVID-19 actually meets the definition of pandemic yet, I think it almost does.
I think it does.
It's just like it has to be spread across the a country or the globe, and it's basically spread. It's just not spreading outside of the U.S. at an alarming rate. Anyway.
Right. Well, and speaking of our favorite little quarantiners, the wonderful Diamond Princess cruise ship is still out there, and
dude, this is the story now.
This is like such a bizarre thing. It's like, okay, we're gonna put all these people together and then apparently even on the ship they aren't really quarantining them.
They're quarantining the guests, but not the
crew.
and so the staff are having like meals together, and and there's this other cruise ship now, the Westerdam. Is that what it's? And that one also has a confirmed case in a passenger who disembarked in Malaysia, and now they're stuck in Cambodia and not going anywhere.
Right.
Way fewer passengers than the Diamond Princess.
Right. Diamond Princess,
cruise ships, man.
Yeah, you
Diamond
can.
Princess, though, they're like the cruise line has announced that they're not going to even run that ship again until April. I'd be like, just burn it,
just burn it down.
Take the insurance money, man. Or they're going to have to change the name.
Oh yeah,
like nobody's going to want to get on the Diamond Princess again.
Nope.
Not that I don't think they've had any fatalities, but the fact that they were in. Yeah, so I've just been reading a lot of these stories of passengers.
And what's extraordinary about this is that now, like the U.S. government, what is the other government sending people? Like they're going to like evacuate their people on the boats.
Italy is also taking people.
Apparently, the only country that's like kind of like, you guys can fend for yourselves is the U.K. And the U.K. people are like being very British about it, and they're like, it's like they don't care at all. But it's pretty bleak. I mean, the updates in this boat. By the way, I have never even before all of this happened, a cruise seems like a bad idea to me. There's always even taking the coronavirus out of it, there's always like weird norovirus crap happening on cruises. I'm like, not anywhere. This is never going to be a thing I would do. But now, never, ever, ever. But then I found this funny. This is very funny because Japan's being so crazy about this particular cruise ship and quarantining and whatever. But yet, did you see the article that I found about their naked festival happening?
Oh, right. Yeah. I mean, you just say that they're being crazy about it.
They're not being okay. They're not being
crazy. The only weird thing about them quarantining the Diamond Princess is in the fact that nothing's crazy about it, but some of the passengers are getting antsy, right? They're like, "Oh, my business is going to fail without me," and I'm like. Well, you guys, we don't know if you have it because of the long-ass incubation period. This is what makes this thing so difficult.
Well,
and when some of them are a little bit nervous about getting on an airplane to fly back to the U.S. and saying, all right, I'm pretty sure that I'm uninfected because we've been quarantined for 2 weeks. But then we're going to get on an airplane with a bunch of other untested people and breathe the same circulated air for, 14 hours. How does that make any sense?
Well,
and I have to wonder...
They're then going to quarantine the people that they already said that anybody that they're taking off of the ship is going to be quarantined in the U.S. for 14 days. But what I was going to say is that, like, what doesn't make sense to me is that basically you're guaranteeing that there will be more infections on this boat with what they're doing. So it's not really a quarantine, especially if the crew's run around. So that's just what's funny to me. Like, it makes more sense to quarantine them somewhere on the land, in my opinion.
And they once they test positive, they put them in a hospital, right? They don't keep them on the ship any longer.
I don't know. But in any case, this whole thing is kind of weird. And then Japan is still going ahead with this naked festival that they do every year, and out of concern for the coronavirus, they're providing hand sanitizers on like around the perimeter of where all these people do, like they do this like run around the temple. I think people throw like sticks at them, and it's like supposed to be something that and people kind of wrestle naked, and like the whole idea. This seems like a very bad idea to do this at this particular point in time. I'm not judging the festival. I think you should go out and be able to run around naked to your heart's content. But the photos from this show that people are having like very, very close contact, and I don't think any mask in the world is going to protect you in this particular environment. So anyway, just thought we would add this for a little bit of levity in the whole coronavirus saga.
I mean, yeah, where you can get it, I guess. We'll continue to talk about it, but I mean, hopefully China's right, and cases really are dipping down. There's only like 200 additional cases since yesterday, based on the data. And that is by far the lowest increase. So
yep,
we'll wait and see. And in other news, scientists did something very sciencey.
Yep.
This is actually, I probably shouldn't have even included this article because it starts off pretty basic and then it gets very
really
sciencey very fast. So some scientists in the University of Dundee had extracted the activator in the cordyceps, that fungus that infects ants and other creatures and makes, well, not creatures, insects and little invertebrates and whatnot, to make them do its bidding and fruit and spread the fungus. So they've figured out kind of like the activator was just determined a long time ago, but they've been able to extract it, and they want to use it for things like cancer treatment because it can either promote or restrict growth. Obviously, promoting growth in a cancer environment is a bad idea. So I think they're still fine-tuning it. There's a couple rough edges, but pretty interesting discovery. Hopefully, when they put this into a human trial, it doesn't create a zombie outbreak. That would be great. Please, science, be responsible.
Well, what I was hoping that this was going to say was that about that other horrible fungus thing, that maybe it would help fight that, because that thing's terrifying.
Which other horrible?
The ear fungus, the one that's like all over hospitals, and basically if you've got like, and it really is, it attacks people with more immunocompromised systems and whatever.
The one that's just everywhere. Doesn't matter if you like light everything on fire, it's still
correct
there.
Yeah. So I was hoping that that's what they were going to talk about, but maybe another day they'll discover that and be even more sciencey. So
well, like part of this article talks about how there's been 150 different scientific papers written on the topic of the cordyceps stuff since last year. Just that it's an area of intense interest in the scientific world, which is also a little bit troubling. But I really hope that, only because my brain is overactive and I've seen too many movies.
Yeah, agree.
But we don't have. There's like no good zombie news out there because Disney controlled the narrative this week. Between Disney and Paul Krugman from the New York Times.
But we're not gonna talk about that Disney thing, and we're gonna thwart their trying to take over this particular part of the market right now.
It's really crazy.
Yep.
Like what a news push they made last week. Yep.
So without further ado, I think we should talk about One Cut of the Dead, and I will add in here that before we started the show, my husband felt the need to chat with Stuart about this because he was so excited about this particular film. It was pretty cute, and as our frequent listeners know, my husband is not really into this kind of thing, other than to watch over my shoulder and make disparaging remarks about how can I watch such things. But this was actually pretty funny. So it gets the Bill seal of approval. I know. It's just an important thing to have, apparently. Did Holly watch this with you?
No. No.
Okay. So, did you want to kick this particular one off? Or
yeah, sure. I'm happy to. This film's title, we watched it on Shudder, right?
Yep.
You watched it on
Shudder? Yep, I watched it on Shudder.
And when it begins on Shudder, it's called a Shudder exclusive, which I don't think Shudder helped to make it at all. Clearly not, based on the budget, but they certainly are one of the only online streaming avenues where you can get it, at the moment anyway. This film's title in Japanese, I'm not going to try and do appropriate pronunciation, so apologies. Sumimasen. I think that's how you say sorry in Japanese. Camera o tomero na, which just means don't stop the camera. is the Japanese title versus One Cut of the Dead being ours. But One Cut of the Dead is like everywhere in this film because they have it's written on the script, right? That they're all running around with. Most interesting thing about this film, without looking at the film at all, is just how well it did at the box office.
Yep.
They shot it for the equivalent of $25,000, and I'm really impressed when you dig into the movie and how many people there are involved that they did it for that little.
I really was surprised. I didn't, before watching it, I deliberately didn't look at some of this stuff. I just looked at it after I watched it because I didn't want to be biased in sort of how I was judging it. But I was really impressed that they made this for $25,000.
Like that, I think, when you read some of like the behind the scenes, like they went from a student seminar series and then like shot the film based on maybe some relationships that were forged in that process. So maybe a lot of people worked for free, but all the more impressive.
Yep.
But then, so in Japan box office, they made $30.5 million. I'm not talking yen because the exchange rate is bananas. And then, in Japan, they made about $30 million in Japan, and then they made another $30 million in the worldwide box office. So this movie made basically $60 million off of a $25,000 budget, and I think launched the career of the director, whose name I'm blanking on, Ueda, I think.
It's Shinichiro Ueda.
Yeah.
And again, apologies for our pronunciation.
And also we should do a huge caveat up front is this film, if you haven't heard, it has a twist. It has like a real shift in the middle. And so I think in order for us to recap it, we're going to have to talk through it, what happens.
And spoil. Lots of spoilers.
It's going to be, there's no way to talk about this movie really without spoiling it unless we just kind of did a 5-minute version and then called it a day. And I don't know. I want to talk through it with
I think we should
HA,
talk about it. So
don't listen to this until you see the film. And, Shudder isn't that expensive. And you can do a 1-week trial, I think, for nothing. Yeah. But so Shinichiro Ueda also, he edited and wrote it and directed it. So he is the over-involved creator of this project. Sorry, AJ, you were saying something?
No, I was saying if you don't want to, if you're really not into the Shudder thing, though, I would recommend it because it's got a lot of cool stuff on there. You can actually rent this through Amazon for $4 if that's your thing.
That's a good compromise too.
But don't listen to this until you do that. You should watch it first.
Yeah, you're cheating yourself to listen to us without seeing this. So hit pause and come back to it. One Cut of the Dead. It wears a couple different coats.
Well, one thing before we get into that, I will say it is one of the few films I have seen with a 100% rating on Rotten Tomatoes.
Right. No kidding.
So that should tell you something, because
even critics can get off their high horses to like this movie.
to like this. So it's a lot of fun, and I think that is sort of what, not sort of. I think that is in large part what the success is that. Not only is this, it's not just, everybody was clearly having fun while making this, but it's also a bit of a tip of a hat to movie making and to I think definitely independent filmmaking and a budget film at that. So I think people just fell in love with that aspect of it. And even the people who were involved with this didn't really expect this to do anything and were a little shocked at the reception. So let's start it out there.
Okay. Yeah. So we kind of launched right into this film as watching a film being made in a way. And it can be a little bit confusing the way that they approach it at times, or the first 30 minutes can be a little bit confusing. The second 30 minutes can be a little bit confusing, I would say. But, once you get to the end of this and you kind of think about it as a whole, there is so much good meta commentary going on that I think that it's kind of once you get to the end is when is the real payoff for this film. And maybe that's a dumb thing to say, and all movies are like that. But I feel like, in retrospect, this movie makes a lot of sense when you don't always know that it is at the time.
Right.
All right. So this movie starts with a scene between a scream queen and her beau, Ken-chan and Chinatsu, I think, are the two. Well, his name isn't Ken-chan, but Ken.
He goes by Ko.
Well, eventually.
Yes.
But
yeah.
She's calling him Ken in the first scene, and her name is Chinatsu, which we don't really find out for a while either.
Yep.
And he's a zombie, and he's coming at her, and she's screaming and telling him to stop, and he stops, and his makeup isn't so good, and hers is fine. But then there's a cut, and the movie kind of takes a back seat for a second, and the director steps in. I don't know. So there's a lot of scenes like this up front where we find out that the director is overbearing and kind of insane, and the rest of the crew are also kind of like revealed as being there, and we're on a set. Mm-hmm. So I don't know, HA, what were your impressions of these first like 5-10 minutes of the film?
I mean, it's a little over the top, so there is that level of it. The person who plays the director is just very much like into it, but also a little, he's quite dramatic in a way that makes you laugh out loud, honestly, like, because it's so over the top in terms of like his delivery. And I mean, you get the premise pretty easily. It's, they're doing this horror film. The director's not so happy with the leading lady's performance, so he's getting like worked up. There's a little bit of the sort of like, inside grumbling about how he's being a little bit over the top, and that leads into sort of the stories about why he might be on edge. This is all being filmed in sort of an industrial complex, which turns out to be a water filtration plant, and it is a pretty cool set. It is a broken down sort of like industrial like building. It's definitely not been in use. There's like, and clearly we know that this was probably pretty real given the budget that they had. So it is creepy just generally, and everything's kind of breaking down. And then you've got, good interactions between the different cast members, grousing about the director, and, definitely some interactions between the two leads, and we find out that they're in a relationship. So there's that kind of thing.
Around this point in the film, after the you've finished this scene with the director chiding the leading lady and slapping the other actor, and the makeup lady's getting involved. They go upstairs, and you start to this is when I was like, oh, this has all been one cut. Mm-hmm. Like, this is all one take. This is one cut of the dead, and it's happening. And so I kind of knew to expect that coming into it, but I'm always impressed by this because
it is impressive.
I'm a small-minded person, and I'm like, oh my god, they have to just keep doing this over and over again. How long is this movie? Is it really all going to be one cut? Et cetera, et cetera. But there are some sort of kind of weird dialogue issues that start happening once they get upstairs and they're talking to the makeup lady. There's a couple of interactions with other members of the crew, like the guy who's like, I got to take the blood upstairs, and the sound guy is just kind of wandering through the frame aimlessly, it seems like, occasionally, and there's some weird pauses in the conversation. Yeah. Where they're just trying to like focus on the awkwardness of this conversation between these three people.
Yeah, and then there's, it feels like there's weird pauses and things like that. And you notice it in this. I'll also say that for this particular section of the film with the one take, it took them apparently 2 days and 6 takes to do this. Wow. Which is, when you think about the rest of the film. So the film is like an hour and a half long. And the other part is this is like a 37-minute one take, and one shot. And so when you think about that, that's kind of interesting. So anyway, just wanted to throw that in there because it is
super interesting. Because I feel like that's one of the first questions that I have when I watch anything like this. I'm like, how many takes was it for that prison hallway scene?
Right, at
Daredevil, with all of the jumping and fighting. And there is a lot of running around in this one, but it's not, nearly as choreographed.
Yeah, so there's some weird pauses, and some of this when I initially watched it was to chalk it up to just, oh, that's the kind of film it is, and there's a little bit of awkwardness, so maybe that's the delivery. And I was very pleased that it's explained later, so that was kind of cool.
Yeah. And then honestly, that's part of the awesome payoff of this film.
Yes, it's great, and there is a great payoff. And one of my favorite parts of this whole little interaction between these three characters is when the male lead, Uriko, asks the makeup lady, and I don't think she's just the makeup lady. I think she's also somehow assisting with this, based upon her interactions downstairs. But he basically suddenly out of the blue asks her if she has any hobbies. And she's like, oh yeah, not really a hobby right now, but I'm like learning self-defense. And she does this thing where she escapes his grasp, both if he attacks her from the front and behind. And I honestly thought that this was like built in, that this was part of it, because her character is quite wily and very much into this kind of action later. But she does this thing where she escapes, when he pretends to like trap her from behind. She goes down on one knee with her arms up and says, "Pom." Pom, which just, I feel like we should do this all the time.
Yelling "pom" is apparently really important.
Yes.
As we find out later.
Yes, you gotta yell "pom." And so that was like kind of a funny little scene. And then things really start to take off after this point. We've got, and then the zombies make their entrance. And that, to me, this is, I've seen better zombie makeup, but I've seen worse zombie makeup too.
Yeah, sure.
And there's a lot of really, especially given that this is one shot, there's like just a lot of great shots, like using the interior and the exterior. And is he supposed to be the cameraman who's like he's like the first zombie we really see? He is just, this was a thing, and again, the payoff is so great later with this character especially. But he does this thing where he like kind of spits all over or like pukes all over the sort of nerdy sound guy. When this first happened, and I was like, oh, that's an interesting transmission of the zombie virus. Did you think the same thing?
Oh yeah, I mean, well, I thought it was just maybe a symptom of someone who hadn't completely turned yet, because he's very hesitant about approaching the nerdy glasses guy. I don't know if he's a sound guy. He's the one carrying the buckets of blood, so I just called him blood guy.
Oh yeah, blood guy.
But he kind of like comes up behind him and kind of whimpers at him for
and it's
first.
Like. And I mean, so I at first thought that this was how this whole thing was being transmitted. And then later on, we see him do it again, like this weird, like spitting or something, which is like really odd. And then it just goes into high gear from here, because he attacks the nerdy glasses blood guy. And then they get, immediately suddenly like the nerdy dude's arm is off and into the interior again. And the funny thing is how these characters react to it, because they're like, oh, is this part of the film? Is this like a gag or a prank? And then it just goes into high gear, and it just reminds me of like a little bit of Shaun of the Dead, where it's like, because the nerdy guy, his arm's off and they're all kind of laughing, and then suddenly they're like, no, his arm's really off. And then it just gets like absurd and crazy.
Blood guy reanimates. Now he's called One Arm Guy, because he only has one arm.
Yeah.
He reanimates. The director suddenly reappears and is yelling at everybody like, "This is the kind of intensity that I wanted for this role." A lot of back and forth there, and then on his way out of the factory, when is he chasing the sound guy who kind of like wanders outside?
The sound guy who's been quiet, and my thought about the sound guy was that he was infected and just kind of slowly turning in front of us,
or just paralyzed with fear and couldn't handle it anymore.
Maybe he's sitting very quietly in the corner for the majority of these scenes, and then suddenly he's got to get outside. So I was like, oh, he's turning.
But then as the director's running back outside, he breaks the fourth wall and addresses the camera directly, which makes me realize that the cameraman has been like the cameraman is part of the crew,
right?
And why he was inside recording this like inane conversation between the two leads and the makeup lady, I don't know, but now it's canon, I guess, that he's in the film, or she. Yep. And so that was to me like kind of a revelation, because it also seemed like the camera was sometimes with its back to zombies, facing in, with maybe the door was open. And this is something that kind of continues through the long cut.
Yeah, and I think you just kind of got to accept that and go with it. So some of my thoughts about this, and this is, again, part of the fun of the film, is that you're trying to figure this out. But it's like, did the director set all of this up to get like a real performance? Right. Is he in on whatever kind of insidious evil is here in this water filtration plant, where apparently the Japanese used to have experiments on people? This is part of the discussion between our three heroes in the beginning. And one of the funnier parts of that conversation is that when the palm lady is saying, like, oh, this is just an urban legend or whatever, and they did experimentation, Ko like points to himself as like an indication about what kind of human experiments they do. It's a really good moment. Mm-hmm. And so you're trying to figure out what's real and what's not here. And that untangling of the narrative is really kind of cool. And it is some fast action now, and there's lots of screaming and kind of silliness going on too.
It's basically a race around the set from now on, isn't it?
Yep. And then there's also the use of the interior and the exterior. Mm-hmm. You really can't see a lot. Like when you're inside, you can't really see a lot of what's happening outside because of the light, and it's just glaring and bright. And they definitely use this to their advantage with filmmaking. So, we have the characters, the three main characters running around, trying to, figure out what's going on. And it very much turns into sort of your normal horror genre here, because the director's a little crazy. He's gone off his rocker. And then there's just silly things that happen. Like the director's like, let me in. There aren't any monsters out here. And you're like, that dude's crazy. I wouldn't let him in. And yet they do. And of course they have to. And, lots of like practical effects with blood, and decapitation and things like that, which is kind of fun.
Pretty much, I think, do all the zombies get... No, not all of them, but death by decapitation seems to be the way to get rid of zombies. Yeah. Also, their heads come off really easily.
Yeah. And mainly it's Palm. I'm just, I shouldn't just call her Palm, but...
It's now. Her character is now, yeah.
Which is also
funny.
She's
turned into the badass, and she kind of gets a little more and more grim, and... and after she cuts off Sound Guy's head, when the director pushes him inside, then they run outside and they kind of run around, try and get in the car, realize they don't have keys. There's a lot of back and forth. The camera goes down into the grass for like a few seconds. Certainly long enough to watch our leading lady, Chinatsu, and Kasahara, who is the one-armed blood guy, like kind of rolling around in the grass for a while. And then they're off and running.
She's like running down that tunnel of light, and then like there's like a weird tunnel underground, and then is fine, like gets out of it because Ko basically comes and rescues her. Right. But we've got our favorite little vomit zombie kind of running after her, and he's
doing some kung fu moves.
He kind of develops into a kung fu zombie, so that's new. And then when they run up the stairs, and now is just like kind of kicking butt all over the place. She's kind of the Bruce Campbell Ash character of this, in that, she's sort of mild-mannered, other than what we've heard about in terms of her self-defense hobby. And now she's able to just, take an axe, go to town. She's like the first person that's basically like, okay, we got to get out of here. We can't just sit around. We got to just take them out. And that's kind of awesome. But then she basically decides that, and we do see a moment where Chinatsu we think may have been bitten, and now is like not having any of that. She's like, oh gosh, I think she's implying that she's gonna hack off her leg with the axe.
It's unclear. Because she says, oh, just to be sure, just to be safe,
Yeah.
But then she approaches with the axe held over her head like anything could happen. So yeah, Ko or Ken steps in to protect. I guess it's Ko in this version of the film because Ken was his character at the very beginning.
Right.
And so he steps in, and there we get to hear some palms. They run upstairs. The camera kind of pans to Chinatsu's face as she's screaming, and in the background we hear a lot of struggling and a lot of palms.
Yep.
And then it pans back, and we see that now has an axe in her head.
Yep. And then, Chinatsu's worried that she's infected, so then she runs downstairs into the weird zombie chamber because she's afraid of infecting Ko. And when she comes back out, she runs back upstairs again and grabs an axe. And we're not quite sure what's going to happen here, but basically we see her kind of following. We see Ko a little bit, and you kind of know what's coming. Yeah. Eventually, when she catches up with him on the roof, he turns around and he's got the zombie eyes going on. We have basically a repeat of what the scene was in the beginning between the two of them, only this time it's for reals.
And he pauses a couple of times.
Yep. And, the director suddenly zooms in and is like, this is great. We'll do this in one take. And you're like, oh, you're really insane. And she eventually, she has figured out how to decapitate now and finally takes care of him. But there's lots of pauses where it seems as if maybe he's listening to her and not going to be a zombie. But that ultimately doesn't work out. And she decapitates him, much to the director's chagrin, who is like, that's not part of the script.
Also, during this scene, Now stands up with an axe in her head.
Yeah. It was very
very strange. Chinatsu screams at her, Now screams back, and then falls over again.
Yep. And then Chinatsu has had enough of the director's BS and goes and totally takes him out. And then we finally see the big, not kind of a big reveal, but she's all covered in blood, and she looks evil. Her eyes are all dark.
She has blood in her eyes, I feel like.
Yep. She goes and walks into the middle of this pentagram, and then we get a nice aerial shot of her looking all crazy and evil with, an axe in her hand.
It's not really an aerial shot, though, right? Because you can kind of feel...
Yeah.
The camera's a little wobbly going up.
Yep. So that's, this whole one take that took them several takes to get. It seems...
And we got credits are rolling here.
Yep.
Too. And so you're like, wait, is it over? And so there's a couple of times in this film where credits start rolling in the middle, and it's a little bit confusing. Yep. But we get a title card, One Cut of the Dead, over Chinatsu looking up in the star shaped in blood on the roof too.
Yep.
And then I think does it cut to black?
It does. And then it cuts into the next part of this film.
Yeah.
But I had the same thought. I was like, wait, am I not aware of what is this? And then, of course, it goes right into what makes this a really interesting film. And we get to, it's basically what was it, a month earlier?
A month ago, and we're in a city, and I think we're on a roof with the guy who was the director on the film, and his demeanor couldn't be any more different.
Yep.
It's a very happy set. He's being nice to his actor, and the crew is all kind of nice, and it's just he's talking about how he shoots commercials, I think.
Yeah, shoots commercials, but is happy to do an average job. He's not.
His slogan is fast, cheap, but average.
Right. And he's basically getting sort of scouted out to do a new thing, he's curious about it, and it turns out that this company wants to have a zombie channel, and their way of sort of premiering this is to do a one-cut half an hour zombie show. And so you're like, aha, I guess that's what we just watched. And this goes into his family, and one of the first things, we basically hear him talking about this potential film and then going home and telling like his wife about it, and his wife is now, and you're like, okay, I'm not sure how this works out. And
right.
We get to see a lot of his background, his little family life. Now
his teenage daughter is kind of a rebel, and they don't seem to have a great relationship, and we watch her getting fired off a set for having problems with a child actor and her mom.
Right. But it's weird because it's like now her mom and the daughter's name is Mao. Or is it now?
So yeah, in this so Mao is the daughter. Takayuki Hamatsu.
Yep.
Takayuki Higurashi is the director.
Right.
So they're the Higurashi family. So it's Mao Higurashi, Higurashi. I don't know how you say it in Japanese. You put the emphasis, I think, on the middle syllable. And then Harumi is the one who is playing now. So Harumi Higurashi. So that's the family. That's our little like nuclear. Right. So it's the director, the woman who played now, and Mao we have not seen before. She's not, as far as we know, in the 30-minute one cut.
Right. So. But basically there's this weird exchange where we figure out that she's supposed to be leaving home soon, so you kind of get a sense of her age, but she's a little bit of a rebel. And then at one point, her mother says to her father, "Oh, are you going to follow her?" And he follows her on set, and it's like he shows up at her work. Yeah. And that's kind of weird, but
just in time for her to get fired.
Yeah, because she's mad that the kid won't cry without using the fake tears, which is a little weird. So there's that. But she's kind of a director like her dad, or wants to be, it seems to be. So there's that. We also get to see other members of the cast that we just watched. The guy who plays Ken or Ko is this famous, like, kind of I don't want to say he's like in a boy band, but that's kind of how it feels like.
Well, the fact that he's having like a TV interview that Mao is watching on the couch and like giggling to herself, it definitely gives off that J-pop vibe.
Yeah, and so we got him.
It's very at odds. Like this interview and his confidence and like is very at odds with the character and the way he was portrayed in the One Cut show.
Yeah.
Right? Like where he was all hesitant and stuttery.
Yeah, he's very confident here and a little bratty, and he's a little bit of a diva. Then we've also got we get to meet some of the people involved with the films, like the producers and all that. And the woman who plays this, I don't even know what she's supposed to be, but she's
studio executive, I think.
I guess so, but she is amazing. There is something about her that is so phenomenal.
She has a very interesting look.
Yes. And she is really, like, I don't know how to, you know what it reminds me of? Because she's just got such a like big personality, but also just like, this is how it's going to be. It's a little bit of Edna Mode from the like The Incredibles. That's like how I was like envisioning her. So she was like a lot of fun, and just sort of this perpetually like forceful, like, and even though you guys are telling me other things, I'm just gonna steam forward because like by force of will, this is what's gonna happen. And that was kind of a cool character. She's also tiny, so like she's like maybe it seems like she's 2 feet shorter than everybody else. So to have this kind of forceful executive character with this perpetual smile, but a little bit of like, just like a lot of backbone was kind of cool.
She doesn't have a huge part in this film,
no,
so
but
I'm a little bit surprised as to how much you were taken with her.
Oh gosh, I loved her. Every time I wanted more of her. Every time she was on the set, she just like.
We do get to cut back to where she is when they're doing the live shot later on. She's basically our analog for the audience, right? And also the studio's reaction to how things are going. And
right.
Those are pretty interesting and funny scenes.
And the actress who plays her is named Yoshiko Takahara. And she is 4'10", by the way.
Oh, man.
Yeah. Awesome.
Little lady. The scene of the first table read is a complete disaster, which I like. This is where you just start to chuckle. Like, this is definitely the comedy of this film is all introduced here, because everything that's going on behind the scenes in the making of, this is kind of like the making of, even though we're going back a month before it was One Cut was aired. it's a comedy of errors. And that really starts to steamroll here in this table read, where you have like, God, what the hell is the sound guy with the towel on his head? Well, his character name is that's his name. Yamagu something. And he has this thing about diarrhea and hard water. And I feel like it wouldn't be a Japanese zombie film if we weren't talking about poop at some point. And so he definitely fulfills that. He's also just this, like, I've been emailing, and he's giving the PA a real hard time. The woman who's going to play Now shows up with an infant. And she's like, oh, my child care just fell through, and he's so quiet, this is going to work. And then clearly it all goes off the rails. Baby's screaming through the table read. Actors are struggling to hear one another and are yelling their lines around the table. And you cut to the director's face, and he just kind of looks like, well, this is it. This is what this is how it's gonna go.
You've also got the main sort of diva guy, Ko or Ken, who's played by Kazuaki Nagaya. And he's basically he's taking this very seriously, and he's like really unhappy about certain things, specifically about a zombie using an axe. He's like, that isn't realistic. And, the rest of everybody else is kind of like, okay, this is a zombie film. And one of the nerdy guy is
Blood One Arm guy. He plays Kasahara.
Yep. He's basically like, there's different zombie genres. There's different zombie stories. This is like one of those zombie stories. And he gets like a very skeptical eyebrow from Ko.
Or just like a total diss. Like, I wasn't talking to you.
Yeah.
And he's also talking to one of the producers about the racism subtext in the script.
Yep.
And that dude comes over to him. He's like, where did you see that? I didn't see that. And he's like, get out of my face. I'm in my zone right now. So he's being a complete diva, not cool even to his other castmates. And so we're not huge fans of, and they do a good job just in those two interactions at this table read
of showing him what jerk is.
This guy as the diva. Joining him slightly as a diva is the woman. Her name is Aika Matsumoto in the cast of the movie, within a movie, and then her actual name is Yuzuki Akiyama, and I think she's the only person with a Wikipedia page. I think this was her first project.
Oh, she's the one who plays the main character, right?
She's Shinatsu.
Shinatsu, right.
The part of the table read, it might be the second table read that they do.
Yeah.
She's like, oh, I have to be covered in vomit. You know what? I would do it, but my studio doesn't let me do scenes where I'm covered in vomit. And so we get a couple of scenes where they're having to deal with a little bit diva-esque people.
Right. And then added into this, because, you've got the executives kind of in there. They want their project, so they're just smoothing things over. So you have one of the other main executive, who we see a lot more in this part, is played by Shinichiro Asawa, and he is really great in this role. And I know
the producer.
He's the producer, and we see him on set a lot more in the rest of this. And he's basically like, oh, no vomit, no problem. Like he's always just basically telling the actors what they want to hear, much to the chagrin of the director, who's like trying to get this done. And the director's working with this script. And while you can tell he still takes pride in his work, but he's so frustrated by all this. And so this is kind of a nightmare table read. And he has to go home to the
worst thing in this table, not the worst, but one of the other huge elements of this table read is one of the actors gets drunk. So drunk he like passes out and like bonks his head on the table and spills water. And that becomes a running issue as the backstory continues.
Yeah, and he is the Kung Fu zombie, and he definitely was. I think part of the stress of this and the stress that the director is having is because this actor is probably somebody he recommended, because we see him in another project that we saw him working with the director earlier on.
He was?
Yeah, he was the guy in the wheelchair with the fake tears.
I don't think he was. I think that was a different guy. I think that guy was older, had more lines in his face.
I don't know. I thought they were the same person, but I could be wrong. But in any case, clearly the drinking with this guy is going to be a problem. And he's so like, I mean, he's just wasted to a level that's like, well, this is going to be a tough shoot. So the director goes home and he's kind of like a little downtrodden and still dealing with stuff with his child, and his wife is like really into the script, like she's like basically memorized it. And she's, asking him all these kinds of questions, and he's, and they both kind of, there's a very odd moment because his daughter is obsessed with Ko, the diva guy, and she starts to like, she's very excited that he's going to be in the film, and has like this weird, there's a very odd little exchange between the father and the daughter here, which I don't know. What did you think about that?
Which scene is this?
This is the one at home where they're like, basically she's asking her, and it's revealed that the mom has actually been an actor before, and her daughter's like kind of egging her on, and it tells her, oh, you've read all of the script and you've probably memorized it, why don't you get back into it? And there's this weird pause because the mom, there's like this weird thing about why she had to stop, and so, which is revealed later, but it's just kind of a funny moment.
It's a pretty hilarious element for the story.
Yeah.
But like mostly my takeaway from this like middle 30 minutes of the film was I didn't take any notes. I was just like, what's happening? What's going on? How do I keep up with what's happening? Yeah. So I was a little bit lost, but it was also like this middle part of the film, I enjoyed it so much because I don't watch a lot of non-genre Japanese film.
Yeah.
And this is the part of the film that doesn't feel genre at all. This is just like, this is a Japanese family interacting at their home and at work. Mm-hmm. And I've never watched anything like this. And that's kind of lame. I mean, I wish I'd seen more stuff that was like this. And so, but there's a whole lot of character development going on in these scenes of the woman who, basically the Higurashi family. Mm-hmm. Did I say that right? Maybe. Yep. But that family, we get them very developed. The teenager is super headstrong and thinks she knows the answers. The director is too nice to everybody and kind of gets beat down. His wife is supportive, but yeah, she might have skeletons in her closet. We'll find out. Mm-hmm. And then the cast and crew of this movie are by turns good at what they do and terrible. And so that's kind of all we really know. And then it's like the day of the film, and I was legit nervous for them to pull this thing off.
It feels stressful because you're like, oh gosh, this poor director, how's he gonna do this? And we basically get to see like the behind the scenes when they start shooting the film, and a lot of it fills in some of the things that we've been kind of learning about, but it does fill in some of the story and some of the things that are implied.
Yeah. So like when we show up on the day and it's still not supposed to be the Higurashis filling in two of the roles in the film, and the axe is still a concern for the character of Ko, like a zombie with an axe. And so these are all like, there are big plot issues that we know going into this that are not settled. And it becomes clear as this, again, the comedy of errors kind of just unfolds, and we get to see them shoot the entire thing, and with all of it, all the problems happening, and watching the production assistants and everybody managing everything that's going wrong is basically the best stuff that this film does.
Right. And we have like lots of buildup of characters, like in this particular section. We see the guy that's been playing our drunk cast member or cameraman or whatever he's supposed to be. He basically tells the director, oh, so sorry what happened at the table read. I'm not gonna drink again, and shows him like a photo of his daughter, and it's this like really weird interaction between them, but gives a lot of sort of background. And
it also leads to the director looking at pictures of his own daughter and how he can impress her.
Yeah.
And because that's definitely something that's missing in their relationship, and that plays into, it's a big plot part of this film.
Right, and it's why they end up on set, I think. And, the daughter's obsessed with Ko, so it didn't take much to to basically get her there. So there's there's some kind of cool tie-ins here. We also see a lot more of the crew in this. So we see what's happening with the special effects people. We see what's happening with the editors. So there's a lot of behind the scenes that we weren't seeing before. Like there's a control room. There's also back at the studio, we've got my favorite tiny executive there.
Surrounded by executive dudes all like cheering and ready for the start. How much were you thinking that this was still gonna turn back into a zombie movie at this point?
I kept waiting for it, but it didn't. I mean, other than the making of, but it was kind of cool. I liked what they did with this.
Yeah, it still never turned back, but it was just so engaging to anybody who's a fan of film.
Yes.
That it completely works.
Yeah.
And I don't know that we need to go through everything that happened. It was, do you want to be like, oh, and so the reason why that zombie was the way he was because he was completely hammered? Or
no, I don't think we need to go into that ad nauseum, but it explains a lot of stuff and it does it in very clever ways.
Yeah.
I absolutely see why this was a runaway hit. A little bit of a sleeper hit. It was a lot of fun. There were genius things that they did in this, and some things apparently that were really just challenges for apparently during the making of this. One of the things that happened that they
the making of
during the one shot, they weren't anticipating like the sort of fake blood ending up on the camera lens, and you see somebody actually cleaning the lens.
Yeah, in the middle of the
as
chase.
They're running, and that wasn't intentional. That just happened, and they went with it. So there's like lots of stuff that happens, and during this piece, you see a little bit more of why, and you also see, some of the little secrets that they've implied, especially relating to now, like part of why apparently she got out of acting is because she takes the parts too seriously and gets lost in the role. So when she's kind of going after our leading lady with the axe, there's a concern that she might actually kill her. So there's that piece, and it explains so much of that, those kinds of things. But it was very cleverly done. I thoroughly enjoyed this, and I was laughing out loud while watching it. So.
Oh yeah, it's just great. Like in getting to know, like every character who's on screen has like backstory that's happening, or at least if it's not, it might not be the deepest thing. In one case, it might just be a guy who really has the shit,
Right.
Sorry, but the scene of the makeup, having to put makeup on the guy while he's actively having diarrhea, I was losing it. I was
laughing, and I was also feeling really bad for that makeup person who kind of was just like, are you kidding me?
Do I have to do this right now? He's like, wait, it's a live shot. We don't have time to wait.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yep.
Just incredible. And then, then there's in the final credits, you get to watch some of the behind the scenes, and you see that there's actually another sound boom operator guy who hasn't been in the show, and you're like, all right, so now this is the crew of the people who are filming the crew, and you get to watch the actual camera. Somebody was chasing the cameraman around.
Yep.
Possibly while they were doing the actual live shot. Because while I'm watching the making of the live shot part of this movie, I'm like, is this the actual live shot?
Yeah.
But no, it wasn't.
It wasn't.
Based on the credits footage, they actually, like you said, they did that 6 times or whatever over 2 days, and that was its own project. And then the making of the live shot part of this movie is another project that they did separately.
Yeah.
Because those are actors and not crew, right? I mean, that makes sense.
Right.
So it's just, and the fact that they did this for $25,000
amazing
blows my mind.
And there's like a lot of people involved in this, and
that's mostly why. And I think they must have worked for nothing or very little. But you know what? If they worked for a percentage of the take, then they're all doing okay.
Well, apparently, especially the 2 leads in the film, in the zombie film, Ko and Chinatsu, the 2 actors, nobody on this cast was known, but those 2 specifically have like a lot. I think all of them have kind of taken off and are at the moment experiencing a pretty successful run.
Yeah.
And the actress that plays Chinatsu, Yuzuki Akiyama, basically gave an interview talking about how sort of surprised she was. She's like, we all celebrated after it was done, and we had like a big party, but nobody really expected this to go anywhere. And then suddenly, it was just blowing up everywhere. And but she was describing the shoot itself, which is like they were out there. I think it was 8 days total or something, and there were no bathrooms, or they had to like stay in this weird little inn with no water, and yet still show up fresh every day on the set and try to like make this work. And so it doesn't sound like, it sounds like they were running a pretty bare bones operation in terms of budget. So I'm happy. I'm so happy for them though that all this was successful.
How gratifying that it paid off. Yeah.
And they deserve it. This is like fun, and it's, you know, and especially when you and I see so many of these kinds of films, I love seeing the underdog, the independent filmmaker become very successful, and I would love to see more of what they do. And in some ways, I think that the budget actually helped them be a lot more creative here, the lack of budget thereof. And I think that it does show when you have, because they, I think, worked on the student project together. I think everybody was all in, and I think that's part of why this worked.
Yeah, just a terrific experience. A little bit confusing for me as a dummy, but you know, once you get past the fact that there are going to be multiple credits rolling in this film, and you just have to stick it out,
yeah,
it's worth it. And it's gone on to be nominated for dozens of awards, mostly in Asia, but dozens of awards nonetheless, and it's won, just to name a few. It won a special award at the Hochi Film Awards. It won another award at the Nikon Sports Film Awards. It won a special jury prize, Yokohama Film Festival, Best Director, Best Film, Best Newcomer, Best Editing. It's been picking up awards at a lot of film festivals, and so it should have. And hopefully it's getting to be screened internationally also. It looks like it's mostly getting all this love in Japan.
Well, but it's on Shudder, and so it's definitely, and it did apparently have a limited release. It did really well in the UK, apparently. So I hope that it just keeps getting bigger and that everybody watches it on Shudder. So basically, this is me giving 2 thumbs up to this particular film. Do you feel the same way?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, this was great. It's not exactly our usual fare, but that's also what's, you know, it's tricky, but it's great.
And then what do you want to talk about next week, Stuart?
Yeah, so next time we are going to try and do the seemingly impossible. We've been doing this podcast for something like 8 years. I think it's actually 7 or 8 years in May, which is insane.
That's crazy.
We are going to finally catch up, hopefully, with The Walking Dead Prime. So we're going to start reviewing Walking Dead Season 10 next time here on Reanimated. We've got we have at least one break coming up where we're going to not record for a week. And so that will help us get aligned with Season 10B as it starts airing next Sunday. And so, yeah, join us again next time for The Walking Dead Season 10 of the Prime show.
In the meantime, if you have thoughts about One Cut of the Dead, send us an email, reanimatedpodcast@gmail.com, or you can tweet at us, reanimatedpcast, or just leave a note on the site, reanimatedpodcast.com. And thanks, as always, for listening, and we'll catch you next time. Ciao.
Thanks. Bye.